Hello, Internet. I'm Jackie Fox. Hello to all of our WotV communities, to the Greens, to the Kupo Super Crew, to Empire, to the Square Gamers, everybody who might be listening. Thank you for tuning in. Today I'm going to talk about something that I don't think that anybody else has talked about. That's more of a kind of a broad issue in WotV right now. And it's that I just don't feel like job VCs are good yet. I do think that there is a chance that they could become good someday, could become really useful. But I think that there are some fundamental problems that keep them from becoming as good as they could be, or at least as good as they often seem on paper, in practicality within WotV. The thing is, I'm just not sure that that future is ever going to get here. So generally speaking, I have to say that I'm not a big fan of job-based VCs. And the reasons for it, well, there's a couple of reasons, but first I want to talk about the things that job-based VCs actually do better on paper that might eventually make them worth it. And again, when I say eventually, I don't want you to invest on something that eventually might be worth it. So again, not really saying that any of these cards are all that great, but when you look at elemental VCs and you look at how many characters are in each element, then that means that there's usually 21 to 25 characters that can benefit from an elementally locked vision card. When you look at job-based VCs, the range seems to be somewhere between 31 and 41 units. So you have a bit more flexibility with the number of units that could potentially use the card, even though not all of them are usually a good fit for it. And you know, when you're picking job groups specifically, and you're putting on something that's like a really physical buff or a really magical buff, it doesn't make as much sense to throw in things, classes that aren't based in that same damage type. Sometimes I guess it makes sense if you want to run a support with that team. So, you know, a physical boost card might have book on it as well to get in a healer like Velas or something. But generally speaking, there's only really one good job subgroup per card. And then the other ones are either filler or things that don't quite fit by definition, generally speaking. There are definitely some job-based vision cards that make more sense than others. And part of that complaint that I just gave you is mainly based on all the ones that are physical or magical man-eater, that type of card. But there are cards that have effects that benefit a broader span of units than just physical or just magical. That are worth considering. And the other benefit that job-based VCs have on paper is that all of the stats that they can possibly give a unit seem to be the strongest possible. It seems to be that job-based VCs have a higher power limit than your elemental-based vision cards. Those are the pluses. But the downsides are huge and considerable, and it took me a while to figure out how to put this into words, but we have an elemental meta. There are several things that make an elemental meta the most optimal thing to build for PvP right now, or for most PvE. One is elemental chaining. I don't think that there's anything that's really going to replace that very easily. Without kind of breaking some of the core fundamentals of the game, elemental teams can elementally chain. That raises damage, so that is an innate benefit over a rainbow team. Another benefit is that there are buffs that are elementally locked on characters' MA2s. We haven't even gotten into vision cards yet, and you've already seen that there's kind of a strong set of reasons why you should build an elemental-only team that are kind of built into the game. And then when you further consider that we have a wide variety of elemental vision cards, there's enough that you can run 6 or even maybe 10 elemental-only vision cards on your PvP and PvE teams. This really reinforces, along with all of those other things, an elemental meta. So let's be realistic. You're going to be putting this job-based VC on an elemental team, and there's probably only a couple of elemental teams that really make sense. So when you narrow the accessibility, the potential accessibility down by what groups would make good elemental teams together, then the number of units that can viably use these within your team formation really dwindles a lot. Now, there are some exceptions to this, and by far I think probably the best job-based vision card that we've gotten so far is Nightmare Before Halloween, because there are just a lot of offensive mages and a lot of supports that can use that really effectively. And I don't know what the logic is behind this, but there are probably about 50% more units that can actually use the skill on the card that can actually benefit from the main party buff, which is kind of weird. But honestly, I could forgo one of my units getting the main party buff off of that card to get that ability on a character that maybe, has high magic, but they're only a support. Somebody like Phoebe. Phoebe can do pretty impressive damage with this as an offensive capability. And, there's a lot of units like that are just really supports. They don't have a chaining move. They don't have a good debuffing move to fit into your rotation for PvE that this is really cool for. And like, even outside of PvP, I would say that this is a really good card. But the amount of variety of different elemental teams that you can put this on that are really, really mage forward, that is a really good cross-section. I think that if there were cards... So, I think that missile teams could potentially do this, but I don't think that we've seen Gunner and Missile on... Gunner and Ranger, Gunner and Archer, whatever, on the same cards, and I don't think that we're going to see that a lot. So that brings me into my issue with these cards into the future, is that there don't seem to be that many synergies within the card, right? You don't see multiple sword types on the same card. You don't see multiple missile types on the same card. Practically all piercing damage is done by the Lancer Dragoons, so I guess that's all on one card. But it just doesn't seem like there are a lot of niches where you're probably going to get even 3 of these cards, even maybe a year down the road, to build a team that will probably still be elementally locked, and the only reason you're using these cards is because they are slightly more powerful than the elemental options. But when you're talking about only kind of a slight power creep, when you start factoring in that more units on your team are more likely unable to get those benefits at all because they don't qualify for the main party buff, then that tiny little bit of advantage really gets countered very hard, I think, by its lack of equipability on most elemental teams. Now, this is kind of something that has to be a case-for-case basis, and I do think that there could be strong job-based vision cards, and I do think that there is a potential future where there are strong, mostly job-based vision card teams. The thing is, that is a future that may never come, because if job-based vision cards suck and are hard to use and hard to equip, and nobody really uses them, then nobody's really going to pull for them as much. And if people don't pull for them, why are they going to keep making them? So we may never hit critical mass with job-based vision cards if they shift to something else and stop doing this. So, like, you would be investing in a future that may never come, which is kind of unfortunate. So, really, for most of these job-based VCs, unless it has a skill on it, like, I'm not necessarily sure that I'm too sold on the skill on the Winter VC this time, but, that's a real good pot sweetener for any vision card. Any vision card that has a skill on it just makes it more valuable in a different sort of way. So there probably will be good ones that might be worth pulling, but it just feels like pulling on job-based vision cards at this point in the game and this point in the meta is just really a recipe for regret, especially when you have kind of limited resources and you might be a free-to-play with kind of limited things that you can pull on, go into pity for one of these and spending 10K and not really being able to use it that much into the future. That just doesn't seem like a great deal. And that's why I don't like the job-based vision cards now. I mean, there may eventually be a point in the future where I will turn around on this and they actually will be good, but I think it's a long road to that point, and I'm not entirely certain that that road will be fully paved when we get there. So, I have to say, kind of, as a general rule, I feel like job-based VCs are kind of a hard pass for me right now. And you know what? If that frees up more of my viz to pull for units, great. If that frees up more of my resources to build up vision cards that I've already pulled that are elementally based, that I think work better in the way the meta looks now, great. I would love to have more resources for that. I'm not necessarily complaining. I don't want to pull everything that comes out. But kind of killing off vision cards for the most part, or good vision cards for a while, to invest in such a strategy that isn't really going to work out, I think, for the player base until the long term. It just seems kind of risky, and I had a lot of hope and a lot of faith when I first heard about this coming out that like maybe it would encourage either either like a rainbow slash meta where, sword just encompasses, sword wasn't broken up into 4 different subgroups, and that you could get sword based VCs and get 3 or 6 of those and have a really powerful slash team that's rainbow. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think it really can, because there's only like 4 job group slots. So unless they make a whole bunch of cards, they're just all 4 of the sword groups, it's not going to be good. And one of the other ideas, that was going to make that good is it's sword plus other stuff. And with there being 4 and only 4 slots per card, they can never do all of sword plus. And they also aren't putting like missile in with gunner. I think that those could eventually be pretty cool. I think the one that might actually benefit from this is the ones that have fist-based stuff, because, there is no support for strike teams. The possibility of getting 3 fist-based cards that might work for your whole team and getting those all on a team together and having a rainbow fist team, that actually does sound pretty cool. And if there are, in the future, for some reason, gunner plus archer cards, and we get a couple of those, maybe 3 of those, you might be able to build a really cool rainbow gunner, rainbow missile team. I think that could be really powerful, especially on certain maps. And there are, again, I think that Nightmare Before Halloween gets us a good part of the way towards having a really strong, maybe rainbow staff mages team, which is most mages, not the off weapon mages, but the regular normal mages, which there are a lot of. I think that has some potential. But outside of those cases, I think it's going to take a while before these are really worthwhile. And it's a bold move. I appreciate them trying to mix the game up and push away from the elemental meta, but I think that they underestimate how deeply ingrained the elemental meta is towards like optimal power within this game. And I think it's going to take a lot more than maybe a 10 or 15% increase on some of these abilities on vision cards to really make up for forcing me to play the game a way that it doesn't really seem like the game was meant to be played. At least right now. Things could change that into the future. It's always possible, but for right now, it just seems like a bad investment all around. Even when you consider its positive traits first, I don't get it. That being said, Nightmare Before Halloween is actually a pretty cool card if you want to pick it up. Although, honestly, for what it does, Exorcist might be better, even though the evasion debuff isn't as relevant against bosses as single target down is. But anyways, those are my thoughts on job-based vision cards. I hope that was concise, consistent, and made sense to everybody out there. And I hope that you have a great holiday season and end up in better health than I've been. So, thank you for watching, and have a great rest of the year, since we don't have that much of it left. See you in the next one.